Good evening and welcome. So wonderful to see so many of you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Looking around the room, I'm struck by how much of you have brought with you. So many different backgrounds and industries, so many countries. Some of you have traveled as far as China and the United States to be with us today, and we're deeply grateful for that. When we began planning the London Forum, our premise was simple yet ambitious: to gather in a single room the people asking the most arresting questions of our time, who too rarely find themselves in the same space. We wanted to see what happens when you blur the boundaries between the scholar and the artist, the technologist and the curator, the writer and the builder. Today, that room is real, and I'm not sure anything quite like this had happened before. What links this group is a rare kind of intellectual hospitality, a curiosity that refuses to stop at the edge of one's own expertise, and a generous willingness to think aloud in good company. The value lies not in what any one person knows, but in what happens when those worlds collide. Between someone who tends an archive and someone who builds the algorithm, between the ancestral and the emerging. These are precisely the exchanges we hoped for. It has taken a great deal of work to arrive at today, and the response has been humbling, well beyond anything we could have wished for. Already, in the short time since we began, there have been such generous conversations and so many incredible people I don't think I would ever have met if it wasn't for this. Coming from a fine arts background myself, I have found it a real privilege to be part of this conversation about art and science and philosophy and new technologies, about history and about the future, about what was and what might be. And I must say one thing I perhaps had not expected is how often the most forward-looking voices reach for the oldest questions. It is quite quickly becoming a community, and I look forward to coming to know those of you I do not yet. All of this animates our broader work, including our journal, whose forthcoming issue, The Future is Behind Us, asks what remains of the human as our tools become more powerful. The forum is where those questions leave the solitude of the page, turned over aloud and brought to life between people. Because the questions that matter most just now do not really belong to any one of our fields. They are better asked in a room like this one, together, than in any of us alone. That more than anything is why we wanted to gather you. Everything we hope to build rests in the end on people and what passes between them. The voices you will hear on stage today and the voice of the person sitting beside you are its real substance. We could not be more glad that you are among them. So before I step aside, I just want to thank our founder, Wushun, Sophie, our partner and editor-in-chief, Jenny, head of art collection, our wonderful team who have worked tirelessly and traveled across the world today to make today happen. We, Sam, Lynn, Hong, Henry, Emma, and Maddie. All of the incredible speakers, of course, and builders here with us today. And to our global fellow, Annette Mies, who's been such a pleasure to work with these past months and whose contribution has been invaluable. I cannot wait to hear from the remarkable people who follow, to whom I should now happily give the stage. Thank you.
Hi, welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. As Hedvig said, I joined the team as a global fellow recently, and our conversations have been very much focused on both what the future of arts and culture might look like, but also how arts and culture can be a host for conversations about the future. These sort of like arts and culture is a public space where we can have conversations about how we want to live together, how we want to use technology and the place of the human in it. So for me, this conversation with this brilliant panel is a start of the fellowship, which will end in the publication of Artifact. It's been a joy to listen to what's come before. I was particularly struck by the use of the Renaissance earlier. So not to be outdone, I too am going to look back. So I want to bring in a provocation from 1824 of a man called Henri de Saint-Simon. He was a French philosopher, and he was the first person who used the word avant garde in relationship to the arts. It's now often used to look at like new forms of art, but actually his avant garde was very much about the artists and culture at the avant garde of society, like people who could look forward quickly and try out new ideas and new ways of living together. And so I looked at his time, and of course, someone who talks about the art as avant-garde lives in a time that is feels strange to the people living in it. So post-French Revolution, nobody knows what's going on politically, nobody knows what's going on with the old social order. It's the start of the Industrial Revolution. It's not quite there yet, but it's coming. So tools and money are shifting, power is shifting. And so looking at his day and age, it felt very reminiscent of ours. It feels like some of these structures that we have relied on or hated, whatever you think of them, they are in motion right now. So I'm really interested in what it means for arts and culture to play a role in that. Like, how does it host? What is its role in it? What kind of institutions do we want for the future? So tonight, I wanted to explore that idea and those ideas with, I think, some of the people at the Vanguard. This brilliant panel before you. So we have with us Tao Chang, who's the Director of Digital Innovation for the Arts for the British Council. Next to me is Kay Watson, who's the Head of Arts and Technologies at Serpentine. Tateo Nakajima, Chief Development Officer at Tama Group and former Arab Fellow, has built many physical new institutions. We have Anastasia, who is the Innovation Officer at the Onassis Foundation, and Anshong, who is an artist whose work moves between painting, animation, installation, and video, but also is, I think, a brilliant thinker about art as a vehicle for the future. So I'm going to get started, and you know this already, by introducing each of you and asking a question follow-up. Tao, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. So Tao, as I was saying, is the Director of Digital Innovation in the Arts and the British Council. And so her work sits really at that point where artists, policy, and funders, and also international networks meet each other. Before this, she worked at AHRC and was responsible for many big investments made in the infrastructure for innovation, including CoStar, which is a large-scale innovation structure around immersive and for the creative industries. So for me, I want you to be with us tonight because your view, you have such a strong view of what it means to support innovation, not just as a project, but more systemically. So I would love to talk for you to talk a little bit about how you connect international arts-led innovation, but also the systems that allow it to happen. So you work with funders, with researchers, with infrastructure. When you think of artists as society's vanguard, does that feel true? And what kind of support does it need for an ecology to be able to be at the vanguard?
Okay, no pressure then.
Just define everything.
Just define everything. Okay, can I just bring the audience in here, please? How many people here in the room have actually heard of the British Council? Oh, everybody. Okay, that's great. Just one person, tell me, what do you think it does? Anybody? I can just point at somebody. Go ahead.
British Council is working internationally to both fund and protect English language as well as culture abroad, but also bring in funding internally to the culture and sustain it here in the UK, but also internationally.
Wow, I don't think I can actually better that. That's probably even better. So, I mean, I think very, very broadly speaking, the British Council is the UK's international organization for cultural relations and for educational opportunities. It has an incredibly broad, diverse remit, so much so that most of the organization doesn't actually know what anybody else is doing. But I think within that, I work in the arts department, and I look after artists and activity in the art and tech sector. So that point at which artists work with technology and make new work, which is very much informed or enabled by digital technologies or frontier tech. I think I come from my starting point would be that at the end of the day, artists, particularly who work with technology, but not just with technology, but less speaking from my own perspective, artists who work with technology are, by definition and by practice, tech innovators. They are drivers, critical drivers of innovation in technology. And that, I think, is often not recognized. So when an artist works with AI, they don't just work with AI as an off-the-shelf entity. They test its limits. They turn it inside out. They challenge its biases. And ultimately, they produce something which is accessible, more human-centric, and a much better piece of technology. And yet, if you talk to policymakers, particularly in the UK government, but possibly other governments as well, that kind of positionality, that kind of role as the link between technology that might not necessarily be good for us, but which informs and in some ways directs and shapes every day and every moment of our lives, you need the artist to give that perspective and to say, oh, I can do something better with it, or it shouldn't be like this, to find where the shortfalls are. I think in terms of ecosystems, you're looking at a very stressed arts community at the moment. I think it's probably fair to say that I can't speak for other countries, but I think certainly arts funding is almost always the first thing to fall off the budget sheet when cuts are required to national budgets or fiscal budgets. And I think, obviously, at the British Council, we see ourselves as trying not just to stop that, but try to reverse it as much as possible. It's an ongoing work in progress, I'd say.
That's great. And we'll come back both to art as a host for innovation, and I think also let's talk about stress, because that feels very much part of it right now. We're not the only sector under stress, but it's a very particular stressor. I think from what you've set up, I'm going to jump to Anshong. So an amazing artist. So you can see his work just across the hall if you so want to afterwards. His work reimagines ancient Chinese cosmology, but also through strange technological creatures, ecological unease, and industrial transformation. I was thrilled to find out that he also co-founded Museum of Unknown, which was an artist-led experimental platform exploring what museums could be. And so what I really like about your work is that you bring the old and the new together, old cosmologies, new technologies, and everything in between. Could you talk a little bit about how, do you think artists understand technological change differently than the technology sector or institutions for that matter?
I think it's dependent on how the artist understanding the technology. I think I asked you a question already, right? Prove it. In the Greece, the art called technique. It means have the same root of the technology. So art and technology, it's the same root. And so it means in that time they're not divided. But until now, the art, it seems very far from the technology. But I think in fundamental level, I think they are still have very deep connection with each other. I think since the Renaissance, in the panel in the afternoon, they already mentioned it. The Da Vinci is the same artist and the scientist, and many identity in one person. So I think, and also in that time, I think the improve of the technology leads the change of the art. Perspective, when invent the perspective, and all the technology of painting changed. It's different from the middle time. And another example is the Impressionism. It's because of the photograph, the invention of the photograph, and also the research about the light. They want to describe the light different from before. So they changed the technique and changed the mind, and then invent the new style of the painting, different from the before. And also after that, in the 20th century, there's so many, the film, TV, and video, and internet, computer, all leads new medium of art. So that means the technology always connect with the art and improve the art. So you are especially for support the digital art. That's the new things. And now I think AI will come AI art. I think in future, that's no doubt. So that means art always really with the technology. And
I think what's also interesting about what you're saying is the title of the next artifact will be The Future's Behind Us. And I think as soon as you start researching, everyone lived in extremely interesting times. Everyone seemed to have gone through a big revolution socially, economically, digital, technology-wise. And so it's really interesting to see those cycles and see those questions come back again. Kay, can I come to you? So Kay is the head of Arts of Technology at Serpentine. And you've been asking what kind of infrastructure is needed for art and advanced technologies for a very long time. I'm a big fan of the future art ecosystem work that Serpentine is doing. We might come back to it. It is, if not, Google it. It's a book series. You should all read it. So the Arts and Technologies team, and you have worked with artists who are working with very advanced technologies. But you've also really explored what kind of ecosystems need to exist around it, not only to make the work, but to make the work good, which is, sometimes forgotten. So from your position, what is the shift you're seeing, and what do you want to see more of?
I should apologise for this laptop. Initially, I feel very self-conscious about it, but I want to remember what's been said in this in this panel.
I want you to
so
be
I'm writing
happy.
things down. Full disclosure: I'm on maternity leave, so I have no memory. So, in terms of shifts, I think art, all art is always evolving, but I think what we get to see, what we get to experience, and what goes to the forefront really depends on the infrastructures around that artistic practice. So that can be anything from what Tao was saying around policy-related funding decisions, or how curatorial practice, trends in curatorial practice, hype cycles, and all of these things. So I'm always keen to, and we discussed this before, always keen to say that art and technology isn't new as such. It's been going on for a very long time. A lot of artists who've been working in this field have really struggled to be recognized over the last 30 odd years. And there has been a change, right? And I think some of that change has been around the ability to access certain tools, both for artists and for organizations, for the whole ecosystem. And where else was I going to go with this? Shows you the memory problem. And I think what I wanted to say is that I think if I talk about my very specific area of art and technology, which I see as like a developing field, yes, it's been happening for a long time. What we are seeing is a lot of artists who are, you know, if we think about art as a sort of practice of creative expression, that is a very singular way of seeing what art practice is and what it does. I particularly see it in the field of art and technology, that artists are taking on so many roles and not purely working on a sort of representational basis, you know, really being critical and interrogating what's happening with these technologies. And also moving between different fields and different roles quite frequently. And some of the reason why that's happening is down to need. You know, people need to make a living, and so you take on different roles with the skill set that you have. But I do also think that there's a blurriness between art forms, between art, fashion, music. Many artists I work with don't really see huge difference between those different forms. And, you know, it's so much about actually the sort of, I guess, the area that you're in may depend on where there's funding, where there's support, where there's knowledge, where there's expertise, who wants to show it. But I do think that this is also representative of the fact that there's so much blurriness between these practices, and I see a lot from art and tech practices specifically because they are also inherently infrastructural in many ways because of this interrogation of the sort of back end, that there is this kind of blurriness between spaces. I think that will probably be enough. I could answer that question forever.
That's good. No, and I think for me what's really interesting that has come with digital culture is plasticity, right? Things can change really quickly. It was great to hear some of the people on the previous panel speaking about this. Someone used the word velocity, the difference between, I think it was San Francisco and London, was the difference in velocity, but it also feels like the difference between artists and institutions. They work at different velocity, and it's really interesting to see that and to see that there is an interest in plasticity, like how do we create more plastic environments where things can change? I want to come to you, Anastasia. So Anastasia is the Innovation Officer at the Onassis Foundation. She works across Onassis Onyx and the Foundation's digital and innovation programs. So her work focuses on building the conditions around new media and immersive practice. So anything from artist development and incubation, new programs, mentorship, but also business development. Because these things are beautiful philosophical and also deeply practical, some of these questions. So I want to ask you, like, how do you think, and I think Onassis does this beautifully, but how do you think about supporting artists when the work is ahead of categories and funding models and commissioning structures? Like, how do you work with people who are ahead?
Great question. First of all, I would like to thank you, Annette, for inviting us and for the Artifact Futures team for building this opportunity to exchange. It's rare to connect the art and tech together. And yes, I want to risk to ask you if you know Onassis ONX or Onyx. I will just briefly present what Onassis Onyx is, because British Council, it's an easier one, I think. So Onassis Onyx is an initiative by the Onassis foundation for art and advanced technologies. We use advanced technologies because of Serpentine, not to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, we liked it and we used it. So it's an art and advanced technology platform. And as Annette described, our role is actually to work on the whole spectrum of art making and presenting and distributing work. Because, as we said, we think that it's difficult to actually expect from the creative community to generate new stuff all the time that meet the quality that the festivals or the museums need in order to present a final work. So we put a lot on emphasis on prototyping, researching, and supporting the early innovation windows, let's say, as an opportunity to advance the creative community and give them space, time to experiment. And yes, the thing that it changes with this, I mean, this you may call it commissioning, but the way and the reason why what we do as Onassis Onyx and it differs from traditional commissioning is when you commission a work, you actually commission a final presentation. But when you are commissioning an idea or a prototype to be developed, you are actually commissioning to the conditions, to the potential of the creator or the idea. For those that come from the startup world and the more tech world, that I also come from there, you already be familiar with incubation, prototyping, seed funding, and all this process. In arts, it's really sad that we miss this a lot, and we are actually expecting the creatives to be ready without no one investing on while they are experimenting. The money, as we said before, the funding, is significantly less than the traditional market, and the risk, although it should be possessed on the institutions or the governments, it's actually true that it is possessed on the artist, which means that the artist has not the freedom to fail. So when we invest in seed funding and prototyping, we actually invest in the relationship with the artist, and I think in the relationship with the failure. So we are pretty fine with actually not reaching a presentation, but we, as you mentioned before, we try to actually value the whole process and document the whole process and actually identify and try to numerize, if this is possible, what's the value created in the process of art making, which is, as you already are familiar with creative research and development, but the tech world or the governments are not that familiar. So for us, the reason why we are having this, let's say, spectrum or services, and we invest a lot in the early stages, is because we really want, and we have the privilege, of course, as a foundation, and we should name it, to actually don't expect for an actual ROI, which is for a museum would be the presentation, for a traditional business it would be the real income. For us, therefore, we have the privilege to translate the ROI of early seed funding in somehow documentation, IP creation, if possible, to actually test the possibilities of the technology. And I think, adding to your comments before, the reason why as a creative community is less treated, let's say, with technology is not that it doesn't serve, but we really, as a creative community, miss the translation. We do not really translate our work to numbers that the VCs even, or even the government can understand the value created. So I think this is like the obligation for the creative community and the expectation for us to actually make something towards representing ourselves.
I highly second that point. I think it's really interesting. There was you were talking earlier about different value systems and articulating value beyond traditional ROI and how the arts really hasn't been able or hasn't focused on doing that in a useful way. So it either tries to create ROI in a more traditional way and failing because it's not what it's for, or it's trying to become instrumentalists in other weird ways. So I think that's really important. I think I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. So Tateo, Tateo is a Chief Development Officer at Tema Group, which a global company that creates water-based wellness centers, but works a lot with art because these are centers where people gather. He started his career originally, which I think is very cool, as an orchestra conductor, and then ran cultural institutions before he joined Arab, where he started building cultural institutions, built many theatre, opera house, museum, concert hall. And so that idea of designing spaces for collective experience is sort of in your bones. I think what's really interesting is we're talking a lot about innovation as a digital thing, which is really important because I think that is where a lot of innovation happens in our thing. But there's also a lot of social innovation happening within arts and culture. It's like how people gather, what these physical spaces that traditionally were there to be quiet and watch the art, what they are used for now. And what do you think are the most interesting things you think are happening in physical space? And what is it for in this, digital age we all like to live in?
I'll get to your question.
Right.
I'm stuck on something you said, and I think I promise I'll bring it back. You and I talked about the fact that I think innovation very often is the result, not the intent. And from an RI point of view, we have a tendency to talk about innovation as something we have to achieve. And I personally think that that is a bit of a problem in the arts. So my son composes, I don't compose. So as a musician, I don't create, I interpret. And that interpretation has a value, I like to think. But I think the idea that in music, certainly, which is my deep background, there is an experimentation phase with technology that does not always result in music in the way I understand music. If I understand music as a communication between an intent, an interpreter, and a recipient of, it is communication at the end of the day. And the intent and the mode of that communication changes by art form. Some are more agile and plastic, able to do something right now, right here, because it's something that is actual. Some of them take time, some of them are allegorical, and some of them are representative. And all of us understand these things differently, and actually we benefit from the diversity of that offer that might exist. But there's no, in my view anyway, it used to be that there was, so let's say my evolved view, there is no hierarchy between them. I grew up listening to Mozart piano concertos, so there's a narrow background. So when you say digital is where the innovation is, I'm not convinced that that's true.
No, I agree.
Which is what I was stuck on. Sorry, because I think I think that there is a reality in our society that is faster than our capability to understand right now, which is that I don't know where I'm going anymore. I just follow my phone, which makes me stupid. Leading to, increasingly I won't know what I'm doing because some computer algorithm has decided the information and filtered the information. And I think a lot of innovation looking backward comes not from that. That's just a reality. We live in that reality, so our tools are different. To go back to wood cutting at this point is a bit a choice, right? It's not the lingua franca that we all work with. So I think let's all agree that we are more digitally savvy, and that may make us more stupid, like in my case, or more intelligent. I've just discovered Claude, for example, so it's sort of, I'm suddenly feeling more intelligent without actually being any more intelligent and probably being stupid. But my point is, I think that innovation is a result of a human need to express, to communicate, and to imagine. And this ties back. So I think the thing I've taken away from my first 25 years as a musician, in some ways is an odd thing, aside from the fact that it's something that feels very natural as a way of communicating for me, is that ritual is good. I know we like to have concerts where people come in jeans these days, and I don't mind exactly, but dressing up for a concert is good, actually, right? Because it's honoring the act. It's making a moment of something. And you don't have to do it by dressing in a tux, but ritual is good. Thresholds are good. Barriers are not the end of the world because it actually makes you think about that moment. Otherwise, we just walk past it. So I think ritual is good, and I think this is something that's interesting. Second part of my career, 25 years at Arab, which I've just ended a few weeks ago. Context is good. There is no experience without context. So effectively, the problem with digital art, I think, is often that it seems to become decontextualized, except it's not, because we bring our context with us. The opportunity of a building is to shape the context in which something is perceived, which becomes a blend between what the person brings with them, their state of mind, and the artwork. And if you are only in a place where it is on your phone, virtualized, then the artist is no longer able to as easily create the context for that. And so the outcome for that, I think, for my 25 years there is context is good, but also that we have a bit of a post-19th century desire to label everything and siloize everything. So the thing I take about Da Vinci is not that he was this and this and this and this and this and this, it's that he didn't care. He really didn't care.
Yeah.
The fact that we care is a problem. It becomes a funding problem, it becomes a definition problem. We create an arts institution that cannot survive because they define themselves as an arts institution, and therefore they need funding from that source and are no longer able to tap into 80% of the audiences who never go to an arts institution. The number of conversations I've had with taxi drivers about the fact that you should go to a concert hall sometime. It's okay if you fall asleep. Because if you can be there and listen to Varese and fall asleep, you're doing pretty well. And you know, that creation of barriers creates problems that certainly get in the way of innovation, but certainly get in the way of communication, which at the end of the day, I believe, is the point of it all. So now Terme. So Terme is this, in some ways backward-looking, in some ways extremely forward-looking organization that is arguably, we think, the world's best at bringing people together under a mission of broad definition of wellness, physiological, mental, and emotional. Benefits of bringing people closer to nature in urban environments, which are, let's face it, variably concrete jungles, which are good at, arguably, economics. Opportunities because we can meet each other, because if I lived in the middle of nowhere, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But humanly, isolating. Always ironic to me that you can be living in a city that is 13 million people and you'll feel much more isolated if you lived in a village with 13 people. That's the reality of our cities. So recreating environments consciously where people are coming together, yes, we intend to make money out of it, but with a high understanding, a sophisticated understanding that architecture, art, enjoyment, wellness, all of this is one thing, not separate things. We're not adding art into it. We do art because that's our human existence and that's our duty as creating that context of experience. And yes, our internal, if you go on our website, our internal organizations, there's a Terme art just alongside a Terme architecture because it's important. And that is defined as something, you know, Terme as a developer of water-oriented wellness organizations also commissioned 100 immersive and visual pieces of art. And that is part of how we work and how we deliver that value. So the idea that it's not siloed, that actually economic activity is not the enemy of art. It's the enabler of it. And whether it comes through taxation, that's fine, or in a holistic environment, I think that symbiosis has to work. And so when we talk about who designs, sometimes it's an artist, sometimes it's a creative, sometimes it's a designer, sometimes it's that or the other. It's all one thing.
I love getting rid of the labels. Fuzzy. Fuzzy is good. And I do think there is something really exciting when...
That only works when you have diversity as well, right? Because actually, if you want everybody to do the same, then you don't get anything.
No, I agree with that as well. Okay, as someone who works in an institution that is both old and new and forward-looking and backward-looking and all of the things, I mean, you've done so much work forward-looking. What, in your work, do you feel like the institutions or the ecology of art, what are they just not ready for? What are they least prepared for, do you feel?
It's a long list.
It is therapy.
Okay. We'll all drop our phone at some point. I mean, the answer I'm supposed to, I should probably talk about AI, but there's a few things here, right, which is I don't think all institutions need to do all things, kind of coming back to what you were saying, and instead really thinking about what your capabilities are as an organization, what you're trying to support, what you're trying to make happen. But, easier said than done. There's pressures on institutions to produce certain kinds of work or to meet certain metrics, which, to talk about metrics, we're very much led by the fact that current sort of visions of success of institutions are how many people walk through the door and how many people go on your website. So that's kind of a boring answer to the question.
Can I ask you a mean question?
Yes.
If this is too hard. If those are not the metrics, which I think kind of everyone agrees with, what would be the kind of metrics what are the value thingy-me-jigs, metrics probably even wrong, that you would want to see instead?
Well, something I would like to see is a shift away from the kind of short-termism that we have within the way that we operate. Now, that is inevitable because often institutions, public institutions are charities which run year on year. So you are inevitably trapped in that kind of short-termism. But if I knew the answer to that, it's worth saying without meaning to just talk about what we're doing. My department have just recruited 2 PhD students, researchers, to work with us on a piece of work that's looking at what are the kinds of systems of measurement and metrics required for creative R&D that emerges from the art and advanced technologies field. So the way that we see it is that we need to, as you've just been saying, we need to build this kind of evidence base, this understanding of what is actually happening over a long period of time, not just, and we will always need that metric of how many people see things because, it's a way of understanding something. But to really look at the impact of something in the long term, but the impact of something not just for ourselves, but our impact beyond ourselves as a sector. So we're really interested in how does the culture, the creative sector, the art sector interact with other cultural fields, and I'm talking here, in the context of art and advanced technologies, we're often talking about the creative industries, of which we are meant to be a part, but we're pretty separate, really, because we don't have that kind of understood economic value. We don't know how to make the economic argument, and maybe we shouldn't need to necessarily, but we do enable some of that creative industries work to happen. I think it's a very difficult area to just be like, we need X, Y, and Z. It sort of requires some sustained work from within the sector to understand how what is happening in the way that we impact industry, the way that we impact research, the way that we impact communities, the way that we impact all of these areas. Now, it's worth really saying that I come at this from the art and tech perspective. I don't necessarily think, I don't want to group all artistic practice in the same, under the same umbrella. Like, there are lots of different types of practices that do lots of different things, and we can't sort of define them all together under the same umbrella. I hope that answers the question.
It doesn't, but it's an interesting exploration. I think there is no direct answer. Anshong, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Museum of Unknown with this. So this was an artist-led, I think I mentioned it before, an artist-led experimental platform exploring what a museum could be, but made by artists. Can you tell a little bit about what started the project, of what happened, and what you learned from that project?
That's the in the 2007. In that time, it's really hot Chinese contemporary art in the in market or in the academical circle in that time. But I think more people is how to say exciting about the price rising. And so it's for me, I think, okay, nobody cares about the academical standard and the value. So that's the one reason. And another reason is I think in that time in Chinese art circle, they are really closed. They focused more about in art circle. They didn't look out of the art circle, and I think there's more interesting things out of the in the world or in the world. There's many things happen, and many interesting the people can exploring. But they just focus on very small point. So I think maybe we can do something relate with the different area, and go out of the. We can talk with the scientists and not only talking with the artist and the curator and the art circle and out of art circle, and the many things we can learn. So that's it's for me that's a very exciting idea, and I think also the for art and the science, I think sometimes they are in the same level when they face the unknown things. That's the creation happened in between the known and unknown. So that's why the name of it. And so for me, it's a failure example, because we have the very big passion with that. Some guys, very young guys, student, just graduated students, and we come together and starting this project. And every week we don't have the place, we don't have money, and we just gathering in the coffee in Starbucks and talking for a whole day, and inspired with some idea, and for example, like geography and theme, and also slowly more and more relate with the science. So it's very exciting. For example, we have organized a forum about the quasi crystal. I saw in the afternoon the Turkish artist show in one frame. I saw the quasi crystal. It's very interesting. It's related the newest chemistry and the physics and Islamic pattern. So that's very interesting. things. So we invite the scholar of the Islamic culture and physics and mathematics, together to discuss about this issue. So that for me, I learned a lot from that, the discussion, and that's for me. It's but problem is that we don't have money. So we cannot sustainable to run it, and so we stopped at 2014 because I don't have any money to support it. So.
And I think that's really interesting.
That's where reality thing.
Like, I've made and worked in and thought about culture for a long time now, over 20 years, and every time I think about leaving the industry, which is about every other week, I sort of feel like, oh, but I love working in this space because it's about the unknown. And I think working with art and artists and culture, it feels like there is such an innate curiosity and such an innate looking at how the world works, how science works, how we work, how we get together, why it's important, who we are. And that feels really exciting. And I feel like that idea, that innovation, like curiosity is innate within art making. And that is really exciting. So I'm going to ask you two the same question. I'm going to ask Tao, can you go first again? Sorry. So I'm going to ask you the same question. I haven't asked it yet. So, artistic courage, I plan to. So, what about institutional courage? Like, what is a risk that cultural institutions or the support system for thinking like that needs to be better at taking? You both have also quite an international point of view, so I'd love to hear where you think institutional courage, what it should look like, and maybe where you already see it as well.
Okay, so that's very hard to answer from my perspective, because if you work in an organisation or organisations that are essentially funded by taxpayers' money, so publicly funded organisations, risk appetite is very low on the whole. There is a real reluctance to try the unknown because of the fear of failure. This is very, very real. You don't want to, you probably find this in the Serpentine as well, don't you, that you don't want to do this in case it ends up being a dud. Nobody comes, nobody looks at it. The single or couple of reviews might be brilliant, but it is still considered to be a failure. And I think that is very, very much the case in public institutions. For example, when I was working in the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is the UK's principal public funder for arts and humanities research, there was a reluctance to take risks. When you're able to shift to that paradigm at all, even the tiniest bit, and it's a supreme effort of will to move the dial just a little. It's tiny, it's almost imperceptible. But that change comes with a massive effort of building the evidence, of crunching the numbers, of making the case, and then making the case, and standing on your head and making the case again. And you're working against very, very entrenched, long-held biases about the arts and culture, which is A, arts and culture is decorative, not economically useful or important. B, it is subsidized. A lot of art is subsidized or supported already by the government, so it's already a minus in the national ledgers. And the arts communities, which funders and publicly funded organizations, the first thing we do, because we are not ourselves experts, is that we go to the communities that we support and say, what do you need from us? And very, very often, the languages that they speak and that we both speak are so far apart that it's impossible to bring them together. Now, when we funded, when our AHRC funded CoStar, and this was a £76 million investment to create a national sort of distributed national capability. So it was a UK national capability for experimentation of using convergent technologies. We framed it specifically as imagination-led, as arts and creativity-led. And that, when we took it to the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, was a complete novelty. They had never seen technological innovation and the creation of new, or the development of new products and services and human-centered experiences as something that was imagination and creativity-led. They saw it as tech-led. So we had to work really, really, really hard to land that 76 million. While, over here, the big plant sciences facility, which was 300 odd million pounds, just went through. So plant science is looking at tiny, tiny fragments of plant cells, or massive, massive telescopes, radio telescopes, optical telescopes that cost billions, literally billions of pounds. There seemed to be no barrier to funding them. But if it was something that was absolutely immediate and of benefit to the economy, which we could evidence in very hardcore economic analyses, it was harder. It was much, much harder. So I think, that kind of, when you have to put in that level of effort to move the dial, that just one little tiny bit, there's no incentive to try to move the dial, and therefore institutions tend to remain low, risk averse.
Do you feel like there are examples out there of institutions that are leaving that particular fight behind and are picking a new battle, so to speak? Are there institutions that work very differently that you look to?
I can't, at this point, my mind's gone blank, so I can't think of any sort of examples of institutions. But I think, you're talking about ecosystems. I think there needs to be agility and the courage to, on the part of government and policymakers and funders, to admit that without the arts, there needs to be two types of courage. There needs to be courage from the artists and the creative community to say, we are part of your economy. Without us, you are year on year poorer over time, over 5 years, 10 years, in terms of well-being, in terms of productivity. And those arguments need to be made. And then on top of that, the counterfactual that you build to say lack of investment equals X amount of, of economic, or those arguments that are written and expressed and articulated in the language of government treasuries, of state treasuries, of what the UK calls the Treasury Green Book. Those arguments need to be made. They need to be made by the institutions that receive that funding. They need to be helped by the artist community. And then, only then, I think, can there begin to be a kind of shift and an acknowledgement that allowing experimental, not immediately, not having a return on investment, that level of creativity and freedom is actually beneficial. But I think we're a long way from that, if I'm honest.
Add something?
You always can.
So, in answer to your question, have you seen where some people that they are doing it? I do think that you do see it place to place, but on reflecting on what the preconditions are for that to happen, I think a lot of it comes down to leaders who know each other and trust each other. So the places where I've seen that, the organization and the context is tight enough that there is really a sense of partnership between the people who are trying to do something politically, economically, and that community. And I suspect this is one of the problems of big cities and big countries as a scale, is that from a policy-making point of view, of course, it's the right scale possibly, but from actually doing something at the end of the day, you and I getting together to talk about something is more likely to result in something than departments talking to each other through across cultural barriers, because what you're talking about is a cultural barrier, actually, right? So cultural barrier and perceptions and different missions, which is a very different communication dynamic. So the places I've seen that work has a degree of charisma, has a degree of trust that is human and not institutional. I've seen some institutions be able to trust each other, but even then I suspect that when you dig below the surface, it's the leaders of the institution who trust each other.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's people. Come on, throw it out.
I just want to add on to what Tao is saying, because we talk about this quite a lot. Just in terms of making that argument, because I think that this is why we, Serpentine Arts Technologies as a department, have started to do so much policy-focused work, because we as an institute, we're not a non-collecting institution whose focus is on the support of artists, creatives, in a number of different areas, but we see it as our role to make the case or to create the sort of conditions by which artists working today can operate. Now, we can't do that across the board, we can't solve the art world, but maybe I'm not being ambitious enough. But this is why we've moved into this sort of policy brokering almost kind of role. We do two things, which is we support artists by facilitating production of very ambitious projects. We don't just commission, we produce and we lead the production. On the other side, what we're doing is saying, we have been for 10 years trying to build this relationships with the policymakers, with the research institutions, with decision makers to say, like, this is what actually happens now. And I think that there, as you say, there is very little understanding from my experience of what art making actually is at policy level now. So I think this is what I see the role of institutions now. It cannot just sit with funding bodies. Institutions like mine, which are very fortunate to be able to function in the way that we do, I see that our role, because we're so fortunate to be able to do what we do, is to try and support, to create those, just to create the infrastructure and to lobby and to advocate for art making as it is today, so that innovation or experimentation, whatever we want to call it, can actually happen. Sorry, I'll stop.
I will add something really short, because I think that you covered amazingly the question. Very shortly, what I believe is that artists remain and are the vanguard, because they have this privilege of asking questions without expectation of delivering answers. This is a huge privilege, because when you are like a startup and you're going to pitch in Silicon Valley, everybody is asking what's the problem that you're solving. And the reason, and what I think that the institution should play as a role, is not to actually expect for artists to provide solutions, but to create the safety zone, as you mentioned, to experiment and create. And based on and I think that there is a risk that actually institutions become apologetic in order to ensure bad funding and get the metrics, the audience metrics, the other metrics. So I think that the institution should don't become apologetic and play on their own terms the game. And I have a good example from a previous initiative that we had. Really quickly, we initiated 2 years ago a summer school program, a professional summer school program between the Athens University of Business and Economics and the New York University Tandem School, the Department of Tandem School. It doesn't really matter, but it matters a bit that the Greek university had funding that could not spend at that time. So they were like, okay, do you want to do something together just to do something with the European funding that they had? And we created a program that we actually brought 15 artists, 15 technologies, and 15 entrepreneurs. We put them into random teams, not random, they didn't choose their teams, but we formatted the team so as to bring people from different backgrounds work together. And we asked them to ideate, create ideas, and every day they had some master classes on different topics. It might be art and media history, or business modeling, or it could be design theory, or it could be AI, no-code tools. So everyone was somehow introduced to the knowledge of the other. And the other half of the program was a very casual innovation program that they should ideate, collaborate, co-create a project to be presented by the end of the 2 weeks duration of the program. And the business school that were the least ambitious regarding this program was the one that was more fascinated about the results, because they have been running such innovation programs for years, inviting, of course, technologies and entrepreneurs to sit together and create products and solutions. And it was the first time that actually they saw amazing presentation at the end, having storytelling and narration, because we had the artist with us. They were ideas out of the box, because of course we had the artist with us that actually were pushing the teams to think beyond what it was obvious. It was not an easy process. We had enough drama during, yes, we had some teams that split it. We were like the social justice there to say who is correct, who is not. It was a very, very weird process, but at the end it has the greatest result that I have ever seen in innovation programs, and I am young, so I will call to the business people from the university, and they also agreed. So I think that that was the moment that we proved that actually bringing the artist to the room was something that could bring value to a business university. And we are happy that this program has now involved a master's program between the Greek and the New York University. And we are also happy that this year we are implementing this summer school for the 3rd time. And they are now, the business school is inviting VCs to the final presentation. They did not even thought about it in the first year, because they thought that they are not going to see something that it's valuable, because there were artists. So they told us, okay, you can invite some festivals, curators. They didn't really care. And now they care the most. They are, the whole team of the Business University is working towards building this master's program. So I think that was a small win without doing nothing, but just proving ourselves with the quality that the creative community can bring.
Love that. Thank you. And I do think, look, this is what art and culture is good at. Bringing the drama. Excellent. But also I think why I'm interested in institutions at the moment is historically that are just places where resources, money and other resources, and artists and ideas can meet each other and can meet an audience, and where that value is created for society. I'm just going to gloss over that economic argument because I'm not the one to make it, but the value is created in that meeting of each other. And I think institutions historically have fulfilled the function of bringing of being connector, of having convening power, of being able to bring technology and technologists together with artists and ideas, but also with science and scientists. And obviously, you know, I think Anshung's Museum of Unknown, like artists are doing it themselves because there is not enough of it. And it sort of feels like we're at a moment where places like Terme are picking up the mantle and the slack that is created by institutions that are just a bit too static to fulfill that role right now, because it is so hard to shift the dial. So let's look forward. It's hard, but there is space for something really, really interesting. going to start with you, Anshong. If you had the power to introduce one practice into a cultural institution globally, what would you make everyone do or not do, or what would you change?
More money. Yeah, it's not only money.
Spend better.
But money is very important. That's why we didn't continue to do that. But for me, I think I would like, there's a empty space for me in some form, and but I need very pure empty space, and let the people come in and let the meeting there, and starting to like talking or discussion, and then find some idea and can do something there, and yeah. It's very simple. I think it's very simple.
I think I like that. I'm going to jump to you, Tate, because we talked about over-designing at one point. Do you remember? I wonder if you can bring that back in.
I think what we were talking about was an experience I had fairly early in my career, talking to the leaders of some of the great arts organizations in the world, Sydney Opera House, Esplanade in Singapore, ones that bring communities together around and generate a creative energy, both championing artists, creating dialogue, creating a meeting place in an active way, and not incidentally being quite expensive places to build. And there's a background for those of you who don't know that in the building industry we have a tendency to always be responding to a brief. So somebody tells us we want this many square meters and this many seats, and it should incidentally have world-class acoustics, whatever that is. And we know it's not. Is a little harder to define. And we don't tend to do things without a demonstrated need. So I asked the leaders of these organizations a leading question, which has to do with the fact that they are leading organizations that are country-shaping organizations, right? They are part of the brand of the country. They are have had the ambition or the result of shaping an entire nation's self-identity through that interaction with the arts. And said, when your institutions were being designed, how much of how you'd use it and what you needed was understood and expressed in the brief. Because today we won't design it unless somebody tells us to design it, right? We might be creative about how, but not the what. So what was the answer? They were, metaphorically, on the ground, laughing at the question, because nobody knew that was going to happen. And this is really interesting, because there is a problem of understanding that this is a sociological human process of exploration. So that then means that the leaders who enabled that investment were doing what I think leadership should be doing in the public sector, which is to actually create the opportunity for that sort of magic to happen. The opposite also happens, though, which is, in terms of our designing, is that, like we said, I'm becoming more and more the enemy of silos. But I should acknowledge that I think that different institutions working in a bigger context can be very focused on something, because it all comes together in one sense, right? So whereas at Terme we think about development in one level as having boundaries, and what do we do inside it with different content, you can see that at a city level, and a nation level, and a global level. But it is true also that somebody tells us we want that thing, and then we try to design the best thing of that thing, and choosing to do one thing and not another means that we're excluding opportunity. So that balance between designing for a purpose and leaving space for change and evolution of that purpose, I think, is something that the building design industry has a lot of trouble with. Because if you're not articulate about it, what ends up happening is you end up designing nothing. So the epitome of flexibility in the building world is a black box theater. Essentially, not a room, right? In an artistic sense, a black box theater is a non-room. Yes, it protects you from rain and has electricity and has places to put lights, but it's a non-space. So you have no context, and that's sort of an isolationist sort of experience. But you go the other end away, it is such a curated space that you can only do one thing. You can do it really well, but you can only do one thing, and you try to experiment and innovate and use technology in different ways, and now all of a sudden the loads don't work, and there's not enough power, and you can't project from there, and all that. I think this is a really interesting problem. And again, in a global scale or even a city scale, you can have many different things that do different things. But I think, as you said, clarity is really good. Do we want to be really good at that thing? Do we want to be a place that is able to do a wide range of things? What is that balance? Do we have a combination? And that comes back to understanding purpose. And I think this is really an interesting thing. Some of my most memorable and most exciting collaborations with clients have been around organizations that have self-defined themselves very differently. An arts organization in Denmark whose self-definition is to combat societal loneliness. They are an orchestra, they are a restaurant, they are classrooms, they are things, but their mission is not to give performances or teach, it's to combat societal loneliness. And the city is small enough that city council and the leaders of this organization can get on the same page, and they, incidentally, also very creative about how they generate money, can pay to bring the Berlin Philharmonic to a northern Danish place and have only 300 people in the room, and it's fine. It's fine.
You know, I love the story of the orchestra that exists to combat loneliness. I think there's something really interesting about the preconditions for great art to impact and how you create that, which is not always to look it straight into the eye, but to go around it, which I think is really exciting. Okay?
Could you tell I wanted to say something?
I can feel it.
Anything you like.
No, I just wanted to, I'm very interested, we haven't talked about this kind of mission specificity, and I think that there's a lot of people obviously looking at the work of Mariana Mazzucato and looking at about being mission driven, and I do think that that is a very important part of who we are as organizations and what we're doing going forward. I also wanted to bring in another thing from the perspective of an art institution. And that is particularly, again, I'm talking about what I am doing, and with the mission of, we believe that artists and the art field can impact the development of technologies. Now, that doesn't mean that we are just talking about technology for the sake of technology all the time, because there are lots of other things bound up in that around culture, society, community, and so forth. But one of the most important things for us in that mission is production. And I think that production is one of the least valued skill sets in the art field. It's where I come into this. You know, maybe I'm a curator, maybe I'm a researcher, I don't know, but I'm definitely a producer. And our work as an institution and the team that we've built in the institution, working directly with the technologies, but also materials and legal frameworks and all the other things that we're doing to make things happen. The like, and this is, you know, art making it's the doing, it's the thinking through and the actually doing it, and that's what we've found to be quite potent and important in our strategy in order to deliver on the mission and the vision that we have given ourselves in this field. So I'm sad I hadn't brought it up already, but production for me is like that key, is a really key skill set. And I hope that we as a sector, as funders, can find more ways to create opportunities around production and not reduce it to something that sits beneath the curatorial, that sits beneath all other skills, because I think it's a bit short-sighted.
Anastasia, Tao, you can force one thing on all the world.
Okay, I think it's similar to the mission, but how at least I am thinking about it is to have a clear and very specific aesthetic. And aesthetic is not only translated as the vision, but let's say, I will mention some tech companies, I hope this is allowed, but ChatGPT has a specific aesthetic. Claude has another specific aesthetic. Gemini has another specific aesthetic. And it has its audiences, its supporters, haters, and all the stuff. So I think that institutions should have a very clear vision, but also a very clear aesthetic, which is translated to the people that they are work with. It's not just a curatorial approach. I mean, of course, it's translated in the program, but it's also translated to the artists that they are working with, the other partners that they are working with, the audiences that they are expecting. And this has a risk in terms of not being liked by everyone, but also this is the good stuff of having like a very clear character, very clear aesthetic, what you're working towards. So for me, this is the number one. And the second one, again, very similar, but in other words, it's the operational courage to be agile and to adapt in what's coming new. So it's very, very similar to what Tate also mentioned, to have one thing that you are doing very well, and you know that you are doing very well, you produce amazing, and then leave the space to be innovative. And this has to be, to take the operational courage, because of course we are humans, it's not our lives. We work in an institution, which means that you might pressure a lot, your technical team, your curatorial team, all the people, the communication teams that works there, because they have to adapt to what's new every time. So it's this courage to actually communicate to the team behind the institution that we need to remain present and adaptive to what the society really asks, because this is the institutions. But this is tough, usually. Yeah, that's the...
Don't be a factory. Tao?
Okay, so if money and with no object and power was limitless,
right?
Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, that's my world.
Okay, so genie in the lamp type sort of thing. I would want governments to acknowledge that artists and creatives are absolutely critical for humanity's survival on this planet. I want them to acknowledge it. And I mean this in more than just a sort of, nice highfalutin. If you look at climate change, if you look at food security, we can throw numbers at people until we are blue in the face and they are bored, and nothing will happen. We can create technologies and there will be no uptake until the artist turns it into something that has resonance and meaning to humanity. So I want that to be acknowledged, and then I want governments to put in place the structures and the spaces and the funding for artists to flourish.
I vote for Tao.
Tao for president. I'm going to round it off. So we started slightly late, which means that I am going to cut the question time, because that means that there is more break time. We will all be around, and you can do questions, but with wine in your hand. So I think this is a better option for everyone involved. I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. I want to thank you all. We will keep thinking about what institutions of the future might be, how we host these conversations, how we build a global conversation about the changes we want to see and how we host that, and how we are radical and how we make incremental changes. So any ideas, any conversations you want to be part of, just let us know. We are at the start of working towards the next artifact, and you can all be part of it. Thank you so much. Let's go to wine.